And good afternoon, Pittsburgh Steelers fans. Welcome to another episode of Steelers Brunch with Tony. I am your host, as always, Tony Defio. And I thank you for joining me on this fine Saturday afternoon or Sunday, if you happen to be catching this show on one of Behind the Steel Curtain's many audio-only platforms. That includes the Touchdown Under, which you could hear you heard this morning on the show. There's the live mic with Michael Beck. There's Let's Ride with Jeff Hartman, the Stat Geek with Dave Schofield, the Retro Show with yours truly and Brian Anthony Davis. And then, of course, we have a bunch of shows on our YouTube channel as well. We have this show. We have The Hangover, 24 hours or so after every Steelers game. We have the Steelers Preview with Jeff Hartman, Dave Schofield, Brian Anthony Davis. We have the post-game show with those guys. We have Know Your Enemy, a great show with Michael Beck and Jeffrey Benedict. And if I forgot any of those shows, I apologize. But I always stumble over this part of the show every week. And also, please check out the Behind the Steel Curtain website, where we bring you news, commentary, film breakdown. Anytime there's a transaction, anytime a player goes on the COVID IR or the regular IR, we're one of the first to bring it to you. So please check it out. Check that out. As we like to say, it's your one-stop shop for all your Steelers needs. And thank you to everybody in the live chat for joining me. So far, we have Steelers Pittsburgh. He says, Steeler Nation, let's have a brunch with Tony. I agree. I am starving for some Steelers talk. And as always, I have a few things I want to touch on today's show. I'll start off with last Sunday's 26-15 loss to the Bills in Bill Stadium. It was pretty ugly. I'm not going to lie, as it has been with the Steelers over the last few weeks. It was kind of masked. Their play was masked a bit early on when they were winning, and even though they were struggling. But after losing to Washington in a pretty ugly way, they lost to the Bills. And it was a lot of what you've been seeing. There's trouble executing on offense. Injuries, the turnovers. A turning point in the game, was the pick six thrown by Ben Roethlisberger at the end of the first half. The Steelers, they were up 7-0. They had just held the Bills to a field goal to make it 7-3. It looked like they were gonna, at worst, go into the locker room up 7-3, and they were actually driving for points. It would appear with about a minute or so to go in the second quarter, and Ben throws the pick six to Teron Johnson. And that was it. That seemed to be the turning point in the game. And the Bills came out firing in the second half. They scored 2 quick touchdowns to make it 23-7, just like that. And that was pretty much the ball game. The Steelers, they mounted a bit of a comeback, but it really never felt like they were in it after that pick six. It felt like, and that's what happens when a team is struggling and it's a bit fragile. Any little thing can send it on a downward spiral. And I think if that Teron Johnson pick happens when the Steelers are 6-0 or 7-0 or 8-0 earlier in the year, I think they could have recovered from it. But being that they've been in such a rut lately, it was no surprise to me that the Bills sort of took over from that point on. They made adjustments, specifically moving Stephon Diggs and putting him on Cam Sutton. And he had a field day in the second half, especially on those 2 quick touchdown drives to start the third quarter. But I think more than anything, it was just the Steelers. It exasperated their funk that they've been in. And I don't know how to fix it. I don't know what to do about it. Obviously, I'm no expert when it comes to designing offenses, but it all starts with that passing game, and Ben Roethlisberger and Jeffrey Benedict did a great job on one of his recent film breakdowns, showing you how the Ravens and Washington, how they've schemed defensively to shut down the short passing game that had been so successful for them as they built most of their 11-0 record. I think teams started to catch on, namely the Ravens, late in that streak. So the question is, how do they fix it? I don't know. I would think that, people keep saying, well, they got to be able to run the ball better. They have to run the ball better. But I just think it's hard to run the ball when teams are crowding the line of scrimmage to take the short passing game away. We saw a lot of that last year with Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges. Teams weren't respecting the pass, and they were crowding the line of scrimmage, looking to take the short passing game away, and it was harder to run. And I think until the Steelers open things up with the passing game and start hitting more of those intermediate 15 to 20 yard passes, I don't think they're going to have much success in the running game. And I realize injuries are a factor along the offensive line, and the blocking's been pretty poor, in the running game, and that has a lot to do with it. But I think, we talked about this all offseason, Brian and I and many others. Once Ben is back, opposing defenses are going to have to respect his arm and respect his reputation, and they won't be able to dare the Steelers to beat them through the air. Well, they're daring them to beat them through the air again by crowding the line of scrimmage, and they're not doing it. Roethlisberger's not making them pay for taking away the short passing game. They're still trying the short passing game with regularity. You see Ben still getting rid of the football quicker than any quarterback in the league, and he's just dropping back 2-3 steps and just unleashing it. I mean, even that one to the pick six, it looked like he threw before he even looked. I mean, that's how it appeared to me. I mean, it was just a total anticipation throw. And if he would have waited maybe another second or another half second, Chase Claypool was open a little bit deeper behind Juju, who he was trying to hit on that play. It was a poorly thrown ball, but I think part of it was because he was intent. That's where he was going to go as soon as he took the snap. He didn't look. He was not intending to throw that ball anywhere else, and that's it looked like something a rookie quarterback would do. So I don't know what the deal is with this short passing game and these quick passes and why he's so hell bent on getting rid of the football quickly. Is he trying to make up for an offensive line? Is he trying to mask its deficiencies in the passing game, or in pass protection? Are they as bad at protecting the quarterback as they are at run blocking? I don't know. It could be that. A lot of people are speculating that there's an injury of some sort to Ben that he's just not disclosing. I don't think it's his arm. I think we've discussed this. Brian and I discussed this on Monday. I don't think it's his arm. If you saw the touchdown pass he threw to James Washington to give Pittsburgh a 7-0 lead, I mean, that was a dart. So I think if there was something wrong with his shoulder or his elbow, then I think he wouldn't have been able to make that pass. But I think that, there are rumors that that he has a problem with one of his knees or maybe both of his knees, and a lot of people are saying it's his left knee, which would be the I guess the knee he follows through on. Is that, if I'm understanding, I'm a lefty, so it's hard to picture in my head. If that's the case, that might explain a lot of it, because a lot of his throws look like they're all arm, and he's really not using his legs to make a lot of his throws. That's what it looks like to me. I mean, if you look at that, the fly pattern he tried to hit Washington on last week, the one that was underthrown and intercepted late in the game when Pittsburgh was trying to make a desperate attempt to come back midway through the fourth quarter, it looked like he threw it off his back foot. He didn't really use his legs at all, his front leg to follow through on that pass. And if that's the case, then that might explain why the ball just died. I mean, if you saw it if you watched that interception from I think it was from the side angle, you could see the ball just fluttering down helplessly like a punt. So, I mean, I think that might have something. I think he might be injured and just not talking or just not disclosing that, which would be unusual for him. I mean, he likes to talk about his injuries. So I just want to welcome some more folks into the live chat now that I see some more folks coming in. Black and Gold Goggles, Michael, Mule Skinner. I haven't seen Mule in a while. Good to see you. Ryan O'Toole, Carlos, Daredevil, Chris Holman, Jason Horn, Ezra Portnaquinba, So if I missed anybody, I apologize, but thank you for joining me. So again, that's, as I keep discussing week after week, the Steelers are going to win a Super Bowl on Ben's back, and of course the defense and whatever. But it's up to him to help figure this out. Yeah, the coaches have to get together. Randy Fichtner, Matt Canada, obviously Tomlin. The buck stops with him, but ultimately it's going to come down to Roethlisberger and finding something in this that he can be comfortable with over these last few games into the playoffs. And I don't know I don't know what they can do other than try to open things up a little bit more, try to and be successful. I mean, you can't just throw 15 or 20 intermediate incompletions. you have to connect. You have to be successful in doing that. And I think they're going to have to figure something out over these last few weeks if they want to have any success at all in the playoffs. So that is my first thing. But the good news about last Sunday's loss, if there is any good news, and there really wasn't anything good about the loss, is the fact that they clinched the playoffs. They clinched the playoffs before that game even started when the Chiefs beat the Dolphins. I guess if you really want to play devil's advocate, and you would have a good case in this regard, you could say it would have been better if Miami would have won, because I think we all knew Pittsburgh was going to make the playoffs anyway, eventually. And, they needed to keep the inside track on the number 1 seed, but it didn't happen. And what can you do? But I think it's great that they're in the playoffs. I mean, I love this time of year. I really do, especially when Pittsburgh has clinched the playoffs. But I just love going back and reading, believe it or not, reading the Wikipedia pages of all the past playoff years, and what teams did what. I just love the playoffs. I do. A lot of people, their favorite time of the year is the draft. If you're a football fan, for me, it's the playoffs, and I just love going back and studying it and seeing what teams did what and what they did at the end of the year just to sneak into the playoffs. I always think that's neat. We're worried about the number 1 seed, and there are teams that just scrape in every year and just are thrilled that they just got in by the skin of their teeth as the last seed. I love that. And then of course I have YouTube now, and I love going back and watching old playoff games. They don't even involve the Steelers. I just love the playoffs, and it's much more fun when Pittsburgh's in it. And if you remember the last 2 Decembers, when you saw the playoffs start slipping away as December headed towards January, and Pittsburgh's grip on the playoffs slipped away, and by week 17 of each of these last 2 years, they needed not just to win, but they needed help to get in. And that's always a hopeless feeling if you're a fan. I'm sure if you're a player too. I mean, it has to feel hopeless knowing that you don't control your own fate with just making the playoffs. So at least the Steelers have that taken care of this year. And they have 3 weeks left. As I mentioned earlier, they have 3 weeks left to get right and to figure this thing out on with the offense. They have a chance to get healthy down the stretch by resting some players, and I think that's what they should do, because I mentioned the number 1 seed earlier, and there's still a chance that they get that. They're 1 game behind the Chiefs, but the Chiefs hold the tiebreaker. They both have 1 conference loss now, with the Pittsburgh losing to the Bills. So the next tiebreaker, it's either strength of victory or schedule. Forgive me I always get those 2 mixed up, but either way, Pittsburgh's not going to have the tiebreaker in that regard. The Chiefs have two more NFC opponents down the stretch. They have the Saints, and if they lose to the Saints, great, but they're still going to have the tiebreaker over Pittsburgh, and then after that, it's Atlanta, and then who are pretty hapless this year, and the Chargers, who have a nice young quarterback in Justin Herbert, and they always seem to be in every game, and they almost beat the Chiefs earlier, but I don't see Kansas City losing that game with anything at all at stake. So I don't think it's looking good for Pittsburgh as far as the number 1 seed. I was looking at the standings before I started the show, and let's see, the Bills are one game behind. And is there really a difference between the second and third seed this year? I think if you can find your way in the second or third bracket, in that bracket, the second and third, if I'm saying that right, that bracket, the 2 and the 3, I think that's essentially the same thing this year, because there aren't going to be any fans in the stands or many fans in the stands. And if Pittsburgh does have to travel to Buffalo, it's not a very long trip. It's the same time zone, pretty much the same kind of weather. So my feeling is, if you wrap up the division on Monday against the Bengals, and you darn well better, Michael Beck, the deputy editor for Behind the Steel Curtain, he alerted us before I went on the air that what's his name, Byron Allen, is that the comedian, Brandon Allen, or whatever his name is, Bengals quarterback who took Joe Burrow's place. He didn't participate in walkthroughs, so he might not play on Monday. And then the starting quarterback duties would fall to Ryan Finley. But even if Joe Burrow was playing in this game, Pittsburgh would have no business losing this game. They better take care of it, wrap up the AFC North. There's a slim chance that you fall to the number 4 seed if you lose your last 2 games after that. I think the Colts would have to win the South and tie Pittsburgh. Obviously, they would have the head-to-head if they beat Pittsburgh in Week 16 next week. I think there's a slight chance that they would fall to the number 4 seed, but not much of one. I think what you do after Monday is you start resting players. A lot of people have mentioned it, and I agree. I couldn't agree more. So I think you have to forget about the number 1 seed at this point. I think you have to worry about getting healthy if you're the Steelers. Obviously, you want to work on some things on offense. You have to get that figured out. But by and large, I think you have to worry about health. And if Ben is banged up and he's suffering from some kind of ailment, some kind of knee injury, then I think it's more important that he rests than it is for him to work through it and try to figure things out. You can still figure things out in the film room, in practice, with much less risk for injury, of course. And it doesn't mean you rest Ben and other key players the last 2 games. I think you play them sporadically. Maybe you play Ben for the first half against Indy, and you take him out, and then you don't play him at all in Cleveland for that final game. And you do the same thing with other key players, because you can't, if you're the Steelers, you can't suffer any more key injuries. I mean, they lost Matt Filer last week with a pectoral injury. He's on the IR now. There's a chance he comes back before the playoffs. Hopefully he does, but you're getting really thin along the line, and as I already mentioned, the line is not performing that great anyway. Or I'm sorry, they're not performing that great as it is. So you can't really lose any more bodies off of that line. Kevin Dotson's doing a nice job as a rookie, but after him, it's J.C. Hassenauer, and you're talking about guys on, as far as tackles like Gerald Hawkins. So you have to try to get healthy, and you certainly can't lose any more players on defense. They've already lost Bud Dupree, Devin Bush. Spillane is currently out, so he's on the IR. There's a chance he can come back before the playoffs, but you can't lose any more key guys. You can't lose the Steven Nelson or heaven forbid a Minka Fitzpatrick or Joe Hayden. You can't lose even guys like obviously Cam Hayward. That line, the defensive line is pretty solid, but they're also thin after Tuitt and Alualu and Hayward. So you have to get healthy, stay healthy, and I think that's more important going into the playoffs right now. I think that has to be their top priority. So that is going to do it for this part 1 of this episode of Steelers Brunch with Tony. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm not going anywhere. Please stay with me. If you're listening on one of our audio platforms, please download part 2 of this episode of Steelers Brunch with Tony. And welcome back. Welcome back. See if I have any new folks in the live chat. There's Eric G. Ron Chess. I haven't seen Ron Chess in a while. Who else we have here before I continue on? Jonathan Benoit. Hope I'm pronouncing that name right. Rhino too, I think and here's a comment from Ron Chess, which kind of echoes what I was saying in the first half of the show. Tony, hello. They need to get some things right on offense and this defense healthy. Yes, that sums it up much more succinctly than I did. Actually, that's really good, Ron Chess. That's great. They have to figure out the offense and get healthy on defense. And it's a little trickier to. I think they need to get healthy on offense too. I think they have some guys banged up. I think Ben's. I think he's more injured than he's letting on, and I think so it's tricky to try to heal because I think their defense. I think they're going to be fine as far as how they've been playing scheme, their scheme and everything. I think they had a good showing last Sunday in Buffalo, despite being down several players, including Vince Williams, who was on the COVID list. So I think in Spillane, that was his first game out. So I think the defense will be fine. I think they have a really good thing going on defense. They fell apart there in the third quarter, but I think a lot of that too was I think they were tired. The offense did them no favors in the first half. So I think it's more easier for them. I think they'll be fine on defense. I think they just need to not have anybody else get hurt. Offense is a bit trickier because I think they do need rest, but they also have to figure some things out. So it's hard to do both. So but interesting to see how they address that over these last 3 games. But I think first and foremost they have to win the division. I've seen some people say that what's the point of winning the division if they're not going to get the number 1 seed because road games don't really matter in the playoffs this year. And I've said that, but I think that I said that in the offseason, right before the start of the season, not thinking that they would be 11-2 and have a firm grasp on the division title with 3 weeks to go. I mean, if you have a chance to win the division, you have to go for it. You can't just let that slip away. I think if they were maybe 2 games back, but they had a playoff seed all but wrapped up, a playoff spot, a wild card spot, then I think, okay, you don't worry about the division. But now that they have the division, firmly in their grasp and they can't, all it's going to take is one more win or one more Cleveland loss to clinch it. I think you have to go for it. And you have to pull out all the stops until you do. And, I think a perfect scenario for Monday would be them getting a big lead, maybe 3 or 4 touchdowns. That's saying a lot for how they've been going lately, even against the Bengals. 3 or 4 touchdown lead and then take Ben out and put Mason Rudolph in there, or Josh Dobbs, or whoever you want to put in there. Although I guess Dobbs is always he's deactivated every week, so I guess they wouldn't put him in. But I think that's what you do if you can. But you still have to try to win the division. Speaking of which, I was. As I said, I'm always really excited about the playoffs, especially when Pittsburgh clinches a spot. I just really love the playoffs. It's probably my favorite thing in all of sports is following the NFL playoffs. I don't think there's anything quite like an NFL playoff game. So I was looking at division teams and how many division titles they've won throughout their history. And we like to say in Pittsburgh, we don't celebrate division titles, which I always think is silly because it's a great thing when you can clinch your division. I mean, for one thing, it shows you that your program, what you have going on right now, is better than your nearest rivals, which would be your divisional opponents. You go into the season thinking, well, we have to find a way to beat the teams in our division. We have to find a way to be better than them. So winning your division, that proves that you have the better program among your closest rivals. And so I think that's, from that standpoint, it's important. So, I think it's a great accomplishment even when the Steelers win the division, even though that's not the standard in Pittsburgh. It's always Super Bowls, but I think it's a great accomplishment. And I was looking at some teams. Like I have a friend who's a Lions fan, right? Big time Lions fan. He's a big time Detroit sports fan. He was at the, excuse me, I dropped my pen. He was at the Malice in the Palace. Remember that fight between the Pistons and the Pacers many years ago? He was at that game. He was at the Game 5 of the '84 World Series. We're the same age, so he was, I guess, 11 or 12 when Kurt Gibson hit his second most famous home run against the Padres. So he's a big time Lions fan, and all those sports and teams in Detroit. And you don't think he'd like to see his Lions win a division title? They haven't won one. They've only won 3 since the merger. Okay, for one thing, and they haven't won a division title since 1993, back when their division was called the NFC Central. The Jets have not won. They've only won 2 since the merger, and they haven't won any since 2002. The Ravens, for all their success since they were the Browns and they moved to Baltimore in 1996, all the success they've had starting in 2000 when they won their Super Bowl. They've won 2 Super Bowls. All the times they've been in the playoffs. They've only won the division 6 times, which I think is remarkable. A lot of their successes come as a wild card. The Dolphins have only won 2 since Marino retired in 1999. Of course, the Patriots have a lot to do with everybody in the AFC East not winning division titles. I mean, they've dominated for 2 decades until this year. The Raiders, one of the more legendary and marquee franchises in all of sports, really. They haven't won a division title since 2002. Washington has only won 3 since their last Super Bowl title in 1991. So, winning a division title is it's a much bigger accomplishment than we like to make it out to be. So I think if hopefully Pittsburgh clinches it Monday night, maybe they clinch it before then. Maybe, it wouldn't shock me if the Browns lost to the Giants on Sunday, and that would clinch it for Pittsburgh. I think that'd be good too, because I think you can start resting players even earlier than if that were to happen. But I think it's a great thing to win a division title, and I realize that's not the standard in Pittsburgh, but it's still a pretty cool thing. And the fact that they haven't even been to the playoffs the last 2 years, it feels so much better this year to say that they not only made the playoffs, but they're going to win the division. So it's a great thing, and we should celebrate and go out and buy the hats and the T-shirts. I think it's always cool because it's as much as it's happened for them since the merger. They've won. I should have looked that up. I don't know why I forgot all about looking at. I think they've made the playoffs 31 times or something like that since the merger, and most of those have been division titles. So I want to say it's in the 20s by this point, but either way, it's still a great thing. So enjoy it when it happens on Monday or tomorrow or whenever. Pittsburgh Steelers fans and all around the world, just enjoy it. It's a great thing. And let's see what else we have here. I will talk about one more thing, and then I'm gonna take some questions. And the last thing I want to discuss is how this just might be a low point for them. They just might be at the low point of their season, but things are magnified at the moment because their low point came after an 11-0 start, and now people are the playoffs are near, and people are under the impression that things are unfixable. But, the NFL is a funny thing. Things can turn around just like that. If you look at 2005, I mean, their low point, they lose like three in a row, or at one point they were 7-5 in December, and they needed a lot of help just to make the playoffs. I mean, that's and they found a way to turn it around over that last month, and obviously they made history. Even 2008 season, they were pretty consistent, but they had a point during that year where they lost two out of 3, and their offense was struggling. The line was struggling to protect Ben, and there was some doubt as to whether or not they were legit. I mean, we look at the entire body of work now. They were 12-4, arguably the greatest defense of all time. That 2008 Steelers defense, and we think, wow, what a great team, what a great year that must have been. But there were some points during that year where they were floundering a bit. And most recently, 2016, they had lost 4 in a row. Ben missed I think a game and a half with a torn meniscus. Cam Hayward was lost for the year with I think it was a torn pec or a torn bicep. I forget. But they were 4-5. There were remember reading an article. I forget who wrote it. It was a local journalist, about how maybe it was time for a change, and the Steelers were, Mike Tomlin's message had grown stale, and perhaps it was time to move on and just start all over. And then they wound up winning 9 games in a row, and it all started against a pretty lousy Browns team on the Sunday before Thanksgiving. They went into Cleveland. It wasn't a great victory. It wasn't an impressive win. It didn't instill much confidence. However, they found their formula in that game, and that was defense. And their defense started getting after the quarterback around that time, and they were actually pretty opportunistic too. And also, I think most importantly, they started relying on Le'Veon Bell that year. That's when Todd Haley, who was the OC at the time, he just decided that we're going to ride Bell all the way to his wheels fall off, and that's essentially what they did. I mean, he was their primary focus on offense during the last 7 games of the regular season, and then the first 2 games of the playoffs when he set single season records for yardage for the playoffs for the Steelers. So they found their formula in that game, and they perfected it as the rest of the year played out, and ultimately they found themselves in the AFC title game. So I think you might not be that excited about the Bengals game, but it's one of those games where it could be the start of something much bigger if they can figure some things out and gain a little bit of confidence as an organization and to get rolling as the playoffs begin. So that's the last thing I wanted to talk about, and I will open things up to some questions. So I have about 10, 15 minutes left in the show, and you guys can start asking me some questions, and hopefully I can answer them without sounding too amateurish. Here's one from Wes Hickok, a comment. My man Wes, welcome to the show, Wes. I always look for Wes in the live chat. He always contributes great things, and he says, if we don't win a Super Bowl this year, it won't happen again with Ben as our quarterback. Well, I mean, that's probably true, because I mean he's getting up there. I mean, he probably has one more year after this, I would guess, and maybe he decides to move on after next year. Maybe they decide to move on from him after next year. But you're probably right. I mean, this is the window is probably, we've been talking about the window closing on Ben for close to a decade, but I think it's safe to say that it's open by a crack right now. I think it is closing. It's almost closed. And here's one, a popular refrain with all Steeler fans, it seems. Mule Skinner, I would like to see the Steelers find a real O coordinator. Well, I mean, as I mentioned last week, I don't know how to feel about that, because I mean we've been ever since social media became a thing back in the late 00s. It seems like every offensive coordinator that's come through town has been public enemy number one by at least the second season. I mean, everybody hated Bruce Arians, and then Todd Haley. He had a couple of years where people thought he was a genius, and then by like 2015, 2016, they started to sour on him. And by 2017, people were dancing in the streets when he was fired, and Randy Fichtner was promoted from I think it was quarterbacks coach at that time, or maybe it was a receivers coach. I don't remember. But then he was recorded to he was promoted to coordinator, and I mean the offense looked really sharp early on in that 2018 season. I mean they were the best at red zone efficiency, which was one of the main reasons why Todd Haley was fired. That and the fact that Ben hated him. So, but yeah, Fichtner he was brilliant inside the red zone in 2018. And then it seemed like last year, after Ben got hurt and the offense struggled mightily with Mason Rudolph and Duck, people turned on Fichtner and they've never looked back. He's public enemy number one, and he always will be until he's gone. So I don't know. I don't know if an offensive coordinator, a new one, will matter, because I mean, even if he's successful, it doesn't take much for fans to turn on the coordinator. I've seen a lot of coordinators get turned on over the years, so I don't know if that would even matter. Here's a comment from Ben Fallon, who joins us from Facebook. We're actually live on Facebook now. I don't know if you knew that. And he says, Randy, well, I'm not going to say I'm just going to take that down. That's not cool. I didn't see that part, but I'll read this comment without the derogatory names. I don't think that's cool, Ben. We don't really do that here. Randy isn't smart enough to establish a formula. Playing the tempo, spread, shotgun, 80% of snaps is not a formula for success. It's a formula for success if it's executed, and they were executing earlier in the year, but then the other teams caught on, and now they have to react to that. That's what sports is. Sports is all about reacting to what people are what the other teams are doing to you, and the other teams have caught on, and now it's up to them to react. And it's funny when people say that about the shotgun and this and that. I mean, nobody ever questioned Tom Brady when he would pass sometimes 20 times in a row, and that worked great, and yeah, they became more of a running team over their last one or two Super Bowl years, but still, I mean, it was ultimately up to Tom Brady to win them the game. Nobody ever talked about, I have a good friend of mine who's a Patriots fan, and I said, did anybody ever really complain about the running game and say that Brady was throwing too much during his heyday? And he said, no, that's ludicrous. Yeah. Because you wouldn't say that about Tom Brady, but Steeler fans, we have this mentality that you have to run the ball and you have to establish run. And what you really have to do is just establish something that works. And I don't necessarily think it's about 3 yards in a cloud of dust. It's about finding a formula that works for them on offense, and whether that's finding a receiver that Ben is develops great chemistry with. I think there's talk about Deontay Johnson, about him really wanting Johnson to be the focal point of the offense. Well, maybe that's because he reminds him of Antonio Brown. I mean, I think that might be why he's trying to develop so much trust in him. And as Jeffrey Benedict pointed out in his one of his latest articles, maybe by the time the playoffs roll around, that chemistry will be there between him and Johnson, and maybe the offense will get humming again. We'll have to see. And here's one from Black and Gold Goggles, which kind of echoes what I talked about earlier. You don't have time to step into passes in 2 seconds. That's right. And that's why it looks like he's throwing with all arm. And again, it's admirable that Ben is getting rid of the football quick and he's staying healthy. But why is he doing it? Is he doing it because he's trying to avoid taking any hits? Because I mean, if that's the case, then I don't know. I don't know if the offense is ever going to improve. If it's always going to be quick passes from here on out because you're afraid of getting hurt, then I don't know if they're ever going to get out of this rut. What else we have here? And here's a comment from Mark Tobin. He says to set up the pass. I'm assuming he means you run the ball to set up the pass, and that's true. But I don't think, as I've mentioned in the past, if you're not effective at running the ball, then people they're not gonna honor the run, and so the pass is going to be ineffective anyway. Here's one from Rod L. Why not running back by committee? I'll tell you why, Ron, because I don't think they don't have the group to have running back by committee. I think James Conner, I thought earlier on in the year that they did. I thought they had a good group of running backs to do running back by committee, or at least as close to it as possible. But it would appear to me that they don't have that right now. Benny Snell, he's a short yardage guy, and that's pretty much it. McFarland hasn't really shown anything yet. And James Connors, he was good early on. But he's been in and out of the lineup again lately with COVID, and I think he hurt his quad on Sunday night. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's James Conner's the best running back on the team, and I think they have to get him going more so than they have to worry about the running back by committee. All right. What else we have here? Here's one from Ryan O'Toole. Doesn't the offensive fix have to begin with the O-line? Running backs need a hole to hit. Yeah, it does. It does. I think if your line is bad, I think we saw that a lot over in recent years. In '08, I mentioned the '08 season, and it was hard for them to establish anything on offense that year because the line was just it was patchwork. It was a bunch of late round picks, undrafted free agents, down the liner, so to speak, and they weren't effective for the vast majority of the year. That's why Ben was so eager to say who's laughing now, O-line, when he was accepting the Super Bowl trophy after Super Bowl 43. And he was just trying, I get it. He was, standing up for his guys, but they did not have a good year that year. And that was one of the main reasons why the offense struggled until the playoffs, ironically enough. The playoffs, the line came together. So that's kind of brings me back to some old points. If you can, if you can fix some things before the playoffs, hope is not lost. You can find your rhythm as you get into the playoffs, as they did that year in 2008. One of the last games of the year was that knockdown, drag out fight in Baltimore, where it was hard to even gain a yard, and they won the division with that great play by Santonio Holmes in the final seconds. But even as late as then, they were still struggling to establish the offense. But they got it together against the Chargers. They continued against Baltimore and against the Cardinals in the Super Bowl. I mean, so they found a way to find the right formula right before the playoffs began. So hopefully they can do that again this year. And what do we have here? Black and gold goggles. Here is a question. Tony, we will never tank enough to get a top pick. So do we go after Darnold or Wentz? I mean, that's been discussed a lot. I don't know. I mean, it's if people they've been focusing on that so much about finding Ben's replacement. I mean, that's one thing you can try. I mean, if you're really worried about finding the heir apparent to him, but what's the difference between Darnold and Wentz and a rookie that you maybe draft in the middle of the first round? Or the end of the first round. I mean, is there much of a difference? I mean, I know those guys have much greater pedigree, being that they were drafted at the top of the first round. But I mean, if Darnold's been around for a few years, Wentz has been around for like 5 years. I mean, is there a chance that you can resurrect their career at this point? I don't know. I mean, like Darnold, I think would be your better bet because I think there's less wear and tear on him, and I think Wentz, he might be mentally shot at this point. I mean, he might be from all his injuries and the fact that he struggled so much since 2017 to really find that MVP form. He was going to be the MVP that year, and then he tore his ACL, and he really hasn't been the same since. So I think Darnold, you might have a better shot because he hasn't been exposed to the league quite as much as Wentz has, as far as figuring him out. But I mean, I don't know. That's something I'm not really that worried about, honestly. I'm just really more excited about right now and what they can accomplish in 2020. And there's still a great chance for him to win a Super Bowl. The quarterback situation will take care of itself. I mean, I have confidence in Pittsburgh that they will address that situation when they have to address it. And if it's after Ben retires, then that's when it's going to be. But I wouldn't worry about bringing somebody in and having him sit on a bench for a couple of years and then, because you're still not going to know about him until you throw him in there. So I think what they're going to do, and I've said this many times, they're going to wait to address that situation, really address it once Ben is gone. And if that's a guy like Darnold or Wentz or whomever is that equivalent by that point, or if it's a free agent that they sign, or if it's a draft pick, I think that's when they're gonna address it. Not until he's gone. I just honestly don't think there's any point in doing that until he's gone. Because first of all, I don't think he likes when there's an heir apparent on the roster. I don't think he's all that fond of Mason Rudolph, to be perfectly honest. That's what it looks like to me from the outside looking in. And second of all, what's the point? The guy's not going to play anyway, so you might as well just wait and bring him in when Ben is gone. All right. Here's one from Ron Chess. Tony, you are right. No new quarterback till Ben leaves. I think he plays 2 more years after this. Yes. This year. And well, I mean, this year's almost over. I think he'll play next year. I mean, they owe him $35 million. So he's not going to, that's a lot of money to walk away from. So, I mean, if it's another 16 games of quick passes and avoiding injury, and you make $35 million, he'll be back next year for sure. So, what else we have here? Here's one from Mule Skinner. Wentz would be a major mistake. He is gun shy. Yeah, I think he is. I mean, I think he's, I think there is something to be said for a quarterback kind of getting ruined by the team, by his experiences playing in the NFL. I mean, there are exceptions. I think Jim Plunkett is the greatest one I can think of, really. I mean, here's a guy who was a first round pick, and he just floundered in the NFL for, I think, 2 or 3. He was with the Patriots and the 49ers, and he was just basically a backup, a veteran backup, and he finds his way under the Raiders in 1980. They had quarterback issues. Dan Pastorini, who they had just traded for the purposes of leading them to the Super Bowl, he gets hurt. Plunkett comes in, and it resurrects his career. He goes on to lead them to the Super Bowl. He's a Super Bowl MVP. A few years later, they win the Super Bowl again. And now, he had himself a nice little career. So it can happen, but I think it's more the exception than the rule. Hey, yeah, Warren Moon, Richard McKinney cites Warren Moon, but Warren Moon was he was more established when he came to he was a CFL legend. He won, I think, 5 CFL titles or something like that. By the time he got to the Oilers, I mean, he was a star. He wasn't a just a journeyman that suddenly got hot later in his career. He was pretty much established. The only question was, could he do it in the NFL? And he did. He's a Hall of Famer. So Steelers Pittsburgh. He has a question for me. Did you buy your Kings of the North sweatshirt yet, Tony? Not yet. Although I'm sure I could find a knockoff down at the Strip District, or maybe even at one of the local grocery chains. But not yet. No. But I'm going to buy one. I'm going to buy one when they win on Monday, because I think it's cool to win the division. Joe Hayden's he slept in his AFC North division championship back in 2017. That's how excited he was to be in the playoffs after all those years with the Browns. So, and I will leave on a positive note because it makes me look good. Great show as usual, Tony. Thank you, Ryan O'Toole. And with that, I will bid you all adieu. And I just realized this as I was doing the show today, that this is my last show before Christmas. So if you're celebrating Christmas, I hope it's a great one. And of course, I will talk to you on the hangover before then. But as far as the show is concerned, I won't see you again until after Christmas. So everybody out there, have a great Christmas, Hanukkah, whichever holiday you're celebrating this year. I hope it's a great one. And have fun cheering on the Steelers on Monday. I think they're gonna make a lot of people happy by not only winning the AFC North, but looking decent in while doing so. So enjoy the game, enjoy the holidays, and I'll talk to you next week.